What an excellent day for an exorcism. You'd like that? Intensely.
On December 26, 1973, The Exorcist, a horror film about a girl possessed by an evil spirit, makes its debut in theaters. It will go on to earn a reputation as one of the scariest movies in history. The Exorcist was based on William Blatty's 1971 novel of the same name, about the last sanctioned Catholic exorcism to take place in the U.S. in the late 1940s. To celebrate the month of Halloween, Hollyweird Paranormal teamed up with LA Not So Confidential for a creepy crossover episode. We talk about ghosts, exorcisms, the story of Roland Doe, the haunted boy, the Exorcist Curse, Satan or psychosis, and the trash bag killer. Grab your crucifix, your holy water, and say your Hail Marys, because we cast out the demons here in Hollyweird on episode 23, The Exorcist and the Exorcist Curse.
Hey, welcome to the first crossover. I hope the first of many crossover episodes of LA Not So Confidential and
Hollyweird Paranormal.
We Are One.
It's
so
finally
exciting.
It's all come together.
Yes. This is Dr. Scott, along with...
This is Dr. Philo, Tammy.
Hi, this is Bryce Mitchell-Williams.
So I can't even imagine that there's anyone out there that is not already familiar with both of our shows if you're here today. But LA Not So Confidential, Shiloh and I are forensic psychologists working 40-hour-a-week jobs in the field, various two different aspects of the industry. We talk about true crime from a psychological perspective, and we also talk about how it's portrayed in media and fiction and media adaptations of real-life crime. And then we met these two amazing youngsters who do...
Ooh, youngsters. I like
Yeah,
that.
I like that.
Wow.
Well, I'm an elderly shut-in. So.
It's on the air now, so it's legal.
It's real.
It's
legally
legal,
binding.
so I'm going to constantly play this over and over in the morning.
Yes.
So we are a true crime and paranormal podcast, but we add a little twist. So we talk about Hollywood true crime and its paranormal association, or just anything that's Hollyweird, anything that's Hollywood.
There's
related.
plenty of that.
Oh, trust me.
Yeah.
So
Lots to choose
You'll
from.
have seasons for days.
driving here, we got a little confused because Melrose was so empty, and I literally said, "Where are all the crazy people?"
Exactly.
I couldn't.
Right. It was so
process what I was
pretty
seeing.
and the
Yeah.
sunshine and the
It's
light.
like the bird scooters. They round them up so they can recharge them. They get recharged in the early morning hours so that they can
For
come
all the
back out.
tourists.
Yeah.
Good. Keeping the flavor alive.
It's like Stranger Things, and like the little kids, like, what's going on? It's
Yeah.
like I'm in the upside down world.
Yes.
Where's everyone?
Our crossover episode is going to focus on The Exorcist. We're going to do is
Most people know The Exorcist.
we're going to really dig into some fascinating areas of this and crossover, talking about the background, what the story that was made into a movie, a very successful movie. And like you youngsters say all the time, we got the receipts, which I love that saying because you do such wonderful research. We're going to talk a little bit about. First, we want to talk about. Look, we've got varying spectrum here of belief in paranormal activity.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit
see where
about
everyone
that.
sits on that.
Yeah. So
And we thought that this would be a good topic because it has a little bit of what we do in our own podcast.
Yeah.
So not only is it a hugely successful movie, and we have the entertainment piece and the paranormal piece, but there's also a true crime piece that we'll touch on. So this was like perfect ground for us. So.
Okay, so what's your status? What are you?
My status is highly skeptical. I'm going to share an experience with you today, but is an experience? I don't know.
Okay.
I'm kind of like, maybe. But I love to hear all about it. I'm like, every time you tell one of your stories, I'm like, Just
Yeah.
tell me all about it. I love scary movies. I love to be scared. We just went to Universal Halloween Horror Nights, like all that stuff. Love it.
You like the chills and the thrills.
Yeah,
You're
but-
an open-minded skeptic.
Yes.
That's the best way
But
to
I
put
think
it.
I am not quote unquote open to some of these experiences.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
So I am coming back from a place where, I mean, in my youth, I was fascinated by all of this. Everything paranormal, all horror movies. I was, classic Hollywood classic horror movies, the black and whites, the Hammer horror films as a kid. And I come from the South, and the South is really steeped in sort of Gothic literature and Gothic perspectives on things. And so as I've gotten older and, I've become more interested and delved into scientific method, I'm a lot more skeptical. However, I've had a number of experiences that, now looking back over a multi-decade perspective, I go, I was really high when that happened. So that one probably, we'll put that in the nay-ish pile. Sure. But I've had like 2 or 3 that still sit with me today where I can honestly say I don't know what it was, but it something happened.
Well, we also talked earlier today about that sort of psychological phenomenon of confirmation bias.
Yeah.
And because you are seeing things happen, you have this sort of preconceived notion of, you're feeding into it, or you believe in a certain thing that you're now saying, yes, that's what it is, instead of basically the opposite of what I do to rationalize it. You're saying, no, this is what it right. It's something
and the problem with that is that on the other side is that if you stay completely in the rational world, like we would not have science if people stayed solely in the rational world. We would not have had alchemists in the Middle Ages doing crazy ass experiments on themselves that gave us that they saw in spiritual terms that then we now understand as the underpinnings of scientific method.
Yeah.
But you have to be creative to understand. So we talk about being open and people being not open. It's like, well, yeah, you're missing a lot of clues. Maybe spirit is throwing a bunch of shit at you and you're just missing it.
So I like to think I'm the Scully to your Mulder.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I like that. That's deep.
You'd look great as a redhead.
Oh, yeah. What about you guys?
I come from like Dr. Scott's, point of view too, where growing up and living in New Orleans, I was so enamored and so interested in everything that was mysterious and all the lores and all the ghost stories. And I was very gullible to the point where right now I've learned to be somewhat of a skeptic, but standing from a logical standpoint, I call it being an extremely, extremely optimistic skeptic. I still believe that there's something out there. I believe that there's an energy, and with enough energy around it, it can manifest. That's what I believe in. I like to call, I don't know, I just feel like I don't call them ghosts anymore. I just call them energy.
Yeah.
To me, that's, my, I guess, evolved train of thought.
Well, that could go in so many different ways.
Exactly.
And energy manifests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talk about that a lot of just like, kind of like what you were saying is like sometimes the baggage you bring to the event is as powerful or more powerful than like what may or may not be happening outside of you. It's like, yeah, if you're bringing all of this extra like chaos with you, a chaotic energy will meet you and kind of expound on that, I think. I sort of am a little bit more skeptical. I was raised incredibly religiously, so like there was no gray area. It was either like an angel or a demon, and there was no kind of like in between. There's like, not to get like super religious, but there's like a verse in the Bible that says to be absent from the body is to be present from the Lord. And so we would use that to sort of explain away, like, you can't see ghosts, you can't see spirits because they're either in heaven or they're in hell. There's like no in between.
Very concrete.
Very like black and white. But as I grew up and out of like that sort of mindset, and then experience things for myself that I couldn't rationalize away with either logic or religion or just like full on lying to myself.
Yeah.
Basically, sort of similar to what you're saying of just like, well, maybe I can't explain this and I don't know why that is, but I'm just going to like let that be.
And it's fascinating to hear about.
Yeah, and I am. I'm the same. Where it's like I really love hearing about it. I don't love being scared, so I don't really share that part of it. I've never,
so you're not going to Universal Studios with us next year?
I will not be going to Halloween Horror Nights ever. I think isn't there like a little light stick that you can buy that's like the don't scare me stick?
Probably.
I would buy like 100 of them. Just hold like a bushel.
A big sign. No me toques.
Do not like being scared. So I like hearing about it in like the daylight of your beautiful apartment. Like that's like my level.
I like hearing other people get scared, but not me.
Yeah. Ooh, so should we talk about some of the experiences we've had?
Yes, let's share ghost stories because people are definitely going to be here for the booze as well.
Okay. All right, can I start?
Yeah, you can.
So when I was in college, I was not yet with the police department as an officer, but I was a civilian cadet working there and working at Starbucks at the same time.
I don't know why, but this sounds sexy.
Starbucks is sexy every time. And my best friend, she was a dispatcher at the same police department. She was a single mom, and she said, I'm going to start working night shift. I really need you as my babysitter. Will you quit Starbucks? And at night, you can stay at my house and watch my kid while I go dispatch. So it was great. She lived right down the street from me. I would pick up her. We were like co-parenting. I would pick up her kid from her in the evening and get him fed and get him to bed and sleep at her house while she worked the night shift. So initially, we would, I would sleep in her sort of living room in a pull-out sofa bed. And she would come in the back door in the morning and kind of walk through the living room where I was sleeping and then go into her room. Then I'd wake up, go home, and that's kind of how the handoff happened. So one night I'm sleeping, and early in the morning, because she got off usually around, 4:30, 5:30 in the morning, and she lived fairly close. I hear her come in, walk through, go into her room, just like any other night. And then I kind of go back to sleep and then wake up, and she couldn't sleep for some reason. Or no, I'm sorry. I wake up a couple hours later hearing her coming back in again. And so I asked her, I got up at that point and I'm like, did you go out again? Like, what happened? She's like, no, I'm just getting home. Mm-hmm. So I was like, all right. So we kind of had this conversation later, and she's like, oh yeah, my house is totally haunted. She said, yeah. Oh, okay. That should have been part of the deal when you're...
Tell me your house is haunted before I sign on.
But then there would have been the cognitive bias, right? Like you could have been primed to freak this shit out.
Right. Could have. Totally. So she said, we were home here one night and someone was trying to break into her home, like break into a window. And it was along the side of her house. And there's a light that she has out there that you have to flip on. Mm-hmm. And she was in a different room and heard like someone trying to jimmy the window open.
Oh my God.
And the light turns on by itself and scares the person away.
Oh, thank God. It's a good ghost. Okay.
So exactly. So this wasn't motion sensor. This was like somewhere you had to go flip it on, and she didn't flip it on. And she lived in the same city where we worked for the police department. So the cops came out, saw that, yes, there was evidence of someone trying to break in. Like, that wasn't imagined. So I'm like, oh, okay.
That's so crazy.
Yeah, later on, she eventually, kind of got a guest room together for me. And the one other incident was that I woke up in the morning. The little boy, he had slept in his room all through the night. But I go to get out of the bed, and along the side of the bed where I were to get out, all of his little action figures are lined up in this long, like 20 of them in this perfectly straight line.
Oh, that's...
And he was still in bed, still asleep.
No.
Right. now they're playing with toys. So that was just, it was one of those things that I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it was Michael. I never heard him get up. I'm a very light sleeper. And she was like, yeah, it's just the ghost messing with you.
I love how she's so blasé about it.
She's very blasé.
Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like once you have a ghost kind of help protect your house.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a great...
You're kind of on a team at that point.
Yeah.
Like, they're not like doing anything hurtful or damaging to you or your family, and they're kind of like on your side, like, oh,
yeah, watching out for you, a little playful.
I'm still mortified, but that's kind of sweet.
Yeah.
Goes.
Yeah.
So I think that's my only really firsthand experience.
Wow.
You know, I had this great old apartment right off Hollywood Boulevard for many years, back when I was still performing, and it was like, I would call it a gypsy house, but that'd be cultural appropriation. But it was basically people who were performers, and I held the lease along with the roommate, and Joe would like, hey, I'm going to go on tour with this show. So-and-so's going to come. It was just, it was one of those great sort of, it were 6 units. We were on the second floor, huge rambling apartment, kind of like this, late 30s Adobe-ish style apartment. And I was there for 10 years. Actually longer. So through transitioning out of performing, but still working in another aspect of entertainment. And it wasn't until being there after a decade that everything started. Like, I had a roommate, a friend of mine from Chicago moved, and he moved in with me. And we were having dinner one night. He goes, what's going on in the bathroom? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes,
You're
no,
like,
there's a presence in the bathroom. He goes, I feel like I'm being watched all the time. And I'm like, okay,
I'm sure you're like, I had Taco Bell, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's a spirit, all right.
It's a kind of Jesus moment.
Is that ectoplasm I smell?
God.
So I was like, I'm always in a rush. I didn't really notice that. But then I started thinking, wait, and all these things started falling into place, and I started calling all my old roommates. Did you ever have an experience? I was like, oh yeah, what was up in that fucking bathroom?
Oh my God.
You always feel like you're being watched. I always felt creeped out when I was in the shower, and then I started realizing all these things, things that would go missing. Like, here are your keys on the table. You turn around an hour later, they're gone. What the hell? Where are my keys? Where are my keys? Going crazy. 15 minutes later, you turn around and they're there. And I used to think it was all dancers. We were all chorus boys. And I was like, well, you can't fucking trust a dancer with any of your clothes, because it's like, oh, I love this t-shirt. Can I borrow that? And you never see it again. It's gone. Right? It's like it's on tour in Europe right now. Your favorite t-shirt.
Let it go.
So I had put it in this context of oh, okay. And then I shifted from working at a big talent agency. I started working in casting, and I got promoted pretty quickly to associate casting director. So first I was an assistant, and then I got boom, I kind of jumped and was having my own projects. All hell broke loose in the apartment. And I'm not kidding you at all. Lights turning on and off in the middle of the night, air conditioner turning on, and I called my landlord, and I'm like, Bob, what's going on with the wiring? He says, there's nothing wrong with the wiring. It's completely new. And I said, so, by the way, you lived here back in the 70s. You lived in this unit. Is this place haunted? He goes, oh, yeah. Didn't you know?
Another one.
I'm like, what do you mean? I've known you for 13 years. But she goes, oh, yeah, it's some woman. She stands in the bathroom.
Oh, my God, no.
Yeah.
And it's a woman. She was like, yeah, honey.
Oh.
I was going to say, could you imagine being in a bathroom for eternity?
Well, then, so
I love chorus boys.
my roommate was dating this guy, and he's coming into the apartment for dinner, and this guy got halfway up the stairs, and he goes, whoa, your apartment is haunted as hell.
Oh my god.
He'd never been there before, and he goes, well, how do you know? He goes, well, I've come from a clairvoyant family, and he goes, well, we don't know anything about it. Tell us. All we know is something's going on. So he walks in, he goes, it's a woman. She killed herself in the bathroom. And he walked right to the bathroom, and he goes, oh, this is really sad. This is really sad.
Oh, no.
What does your roommate do? And he goes, oh, Scott's he's a casting director. He goes, oh, that's it. She was an actress. She never made it. And something shifted in his energy, and now she wants his attention. So it escalated to waking up because I would feel a hand on my shoulder. I would see in the dead of night pops of light, like flash bulbs going off. And people would come in. Like I had a friend of mine that hung out, and she did not believe. She's like absolutely does not believe in anything. And I said, "No, April, it's happening all the time." And we were sitting in my bedroom on the computer, and she goes, "No, it's not." And then right in front of her face, a pop of light, like a firefly going off. And we both just sat there and went, "This is crazy." And I ended up moving out a couple of years later because Dan and I moved in together. But it was crazy. It was like, okay,
she wanted to perform her monologue. She's like, "I want you."
I know, that's so
to
creepy.
listen to me real quickly. What do you think of this?
It's like looking into my future.
I've prepared
Stalking casting.
Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh no, the headshot appeared out of nowhere. Like,
I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Oh my
I
god!
had them the whole time.
Oh my god!
I've had
The story
story.
fits.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
And the saddest thing is that building is gone now. They tore down the building and the building next to it, and there's this super modern 5-story building that takes the whole thing.
No.
And I want to
That
go
happens
like,
in
oh my
Hollywood.
god, was that energy attached to the physical building, or is now she wandering around in that area where the bathroom was? Yes, I'm just fascinated by that stuff. So
that's so crazy.
Oh my god! We did an episode on famous haunted Hollywood apartments, and there were like a slew of them on Hollywood Boulevard.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, was it the Hudson or the Gershwin? There's a ton of them that
just think of all that energy. I mean, all that
it's all the energy
focus.
from the 30s and the 40s. I mean,
Especially disappointed actor energy. Like, we see
nothing's
that.
more tragic.
It really is, though. It's just like there's all that like pent up hopes and dreams mixed in with like disappointment and rejection.
When I would teach audition workshops years ago, the thing that I would tell actors, you got to deal with your shit because you're a great actor. Don't come in here with a neon sign over your head needing me to validate you. You have to learn to validate yourself. That's how you're going to get your job.
Yeah.
Can you teach at our school? Can you tell some of these stories?
Do they need like a resident psychologist?
But it's
we
you
kind of do
because they don't understand. It's like you can be the best actor in the. You can be ferociously talented and have absolutely the right look. But if you're carrying that frisson of crazy like. Validate me, hire me. This job will change my life. I mean, I would tell people this one job holds potential, but there's thousands of other potentials that are going to be out there. You can't focus on this. So, I mean, that's just an example of like that desperation thing that you're talking about. Now let's multiply that times 1,000,000, and that's what Hollywood Boulevard is. It's glamour, right? Glamour is fairy magic. That's all illusion.
Yeah,
it's all illusion, and it falls apart for people.
That's what Bryce always mentions. That
like, layers of deceit in a way and like energy because like you see, especially I think the Oscars are the perfect example.
That is
Hollywood Boulevard is like the way I walk every morning to get to school. It does not look like that. It is the in fact exact opposite of what you're seeing on TV. So it's like just a very physical. They literally cover the sidewalk and the street with red carpet. Like
after they've hosed down all the urine, you're like gagging as you're walking down the street.
All the homeless people out of the line of sight. Like there was all that like controversy in Beijing during the Olympics. Like they're like shipping their homeless population like out of the city. Yeah, what do you think we do in Los Angeles every award season?
Exactly.
Like,
and we did it for the Olympics. The big Olympics here too. We shipped them all. It was
100%.
so
ship
unfair.
them out and ship them right back here.
So it's just that very physical layer of like covering the grime of Hollywood, and then of course you add in like decades of that, and just like
all that focus.
Of course, the Boulevard is like full of haunted, broken dreams. Like, and I always say at the school too, like. Acting is not therapy. Please do not like. They're just like weeping in the like lobby. There's like families visiting for a tour. I'm like, can you take this outside? Like,
Turn it down a notch.
Yeah, it's very.
There's
intense.
lots of therapists in LA.
Oh my god!
So many, I know.
Can't swing a cat by the tail. I'm telling you.
I love it.
So your ghost stories.
I had dinner with a mutual friend last night who shared a ghost story of her own that has been, it's currently happening.
It freaked me out on the way over here. I was like,
I was telling Bryce this and you guys this. So we were having dinner and we were just bouncing ideas for the live show we're going to have in Pasadena. And she was telling me that she lives in an apartment in North Hollywood and she lives with 2 other girls. And one of the girls, like, there's 2 per room. So there's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. And one of the girls would wake up late at night and feel the sensation of someone like touching her toes. And when she would kind of open her eyes from her sleep, she would see like a vision of a man in the shadows, look like a kind of like older Asian man. And this would happen, a couple of times a week. And then my friend has another friend who is very sensitive. She didn't tell her anything about what, her roommate was seeing at night. So the girlfriend was staying at their apartment for a couple of days, and then she looks at, she tells her friend and the roommates, by the way, you have like this Asian guy here.
No.
And they're like, wait, what?
Now, see, that's the thing that's fascinating to me is when the information is not shared and they get that specific,
Yes.
like that,
The bathroom.
that-
Yeah.
and there's so many records of that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
See, and I'm like, is there an old Asian man in the apartment somewhere?
Yeah, and why does he have a foot fetish? All of a sudden.
Well,
Well,
a
we
very
work with
common one.
yeah, that's yeah.
That's nothing.
What is this?
That's nothing.
It is so common. It's the most common one, though.
Yeah.
I mean, foot
Yeah.
fetishes are the most common.
Body part type fetish.
Yeah.
I do not get that.
And, well, this is another
So you don't know about shrimping?
Oh my God.
I do not.
Your face says it all.
I'll leave that to you for you to look
Great.
up.
I'm going to just Google that.
Yeah.
Just hear me crying. What does that sound? Is that a ghost? No, it's Bryce. He's crying.
He's leaving.
Can't
Where
stop.
did Bryce go? He's doing he's crying in the tub in the bathroom.
That's your homework.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a foot aversion, so whenever I hear about like foot fetishes, I'm like, really? Like,
That was so interesting. But the friend was explaining to them, he started touching my toes.
Oh yeah.
I know.
And I think she's also she's clairvoyant, clairaudient, and clairsentient. She can smell, so she's like, "Oh yeah, do you always smell like there's tea brewing? Because I smell oolong tea."
Wow.
And,
That's specific.
Yes, and one of the girls is saying, "Yeah, I came home one evening and I thought I smelled tea, and I thought maybe someone made tea in the kitchen, but it's been happening on a daily basis."
Wow.
She's like, "Yeah, that's him. That's him brewing it."
Wow. Oh my gosh. Oh, don't touch my toes.
Don't touch my toes, but do
No,
brew
but
me
don't get
some
some
coffee
tea. Yeah, like-
as a ghost. Like, I feel mixed things about this story
So
now.
as a ghost, you can still like brew
Nice.
like your favorite things.
Hope. I like that.
There's hope, right?
Yeah, yeah.
There's hope.
Yes.
Oh.
There's this weird guy. There's this like vision of this guy that keeps on going down like the driveway of or the drive-through of the Starbucks. This Bryce.
Oh, it's me.
weird eyes. Yeah.
Ooh, yes, a little.
What's your first step?
Is
Oh,
it?
yeah, it might be.
My bad. Sorry. I have the page open for The Exorcist for later. I have a lot of weird, like we were talking to Dr. Trello about like things that I can't quite explain and like maybe this was. So I'll tell like a kind of quick one. In college, I went to a very conservative like Christian university, and we were like assigned for, I forget exactly which class. It was some kind of like critical thinking and Christianity, some type of like dogma type class. And we were assigned this book.
I'm so buttoning
I'm like,
my
is-
lip right
I
now.
No, it's fine.
Isn't that an oxymoron in so many
Yes.
ways?
So buttoning my lip.
Yes, but right. I mean, that was the entire curriculum, was like the sort of ways that you can prove, quote unquote, the Bible and religion through critical thinking, which like is a complete, I don't know.
Different podcast.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about like what faith actually
Different
is. Yeah. 4 hours later, I'm still like ranting. But I was reading this book, and it was about like a missionary in China, and he like meets this Buddhist monk who's like possessed. Is sort of the very broad overview of this book, and I was reading it in my dorm room at like 2 a.m. It was like due the next day. Very good student, and in the corner of my eye, we had 2 rooms in our dorm, and the one room we had put black lights in like our overhead lights. Yeah, really classy. It was 2004. What do you want? And in the corner of my eye, it was like a moth was just fluttering, but like it was hard to see. And every time I would look, there was nothing there. And then I would like go back to reading it, and then it would just be like fluttering in like my peripheral. And I can't see anything because it's all blacklit. Mm-hmm. And so I turned my desk light on because it was like the only source of real light. And when I turned it on, the fluttering like flashed across, like horizontally across like my vision. but I knew it wasn't like a moth because it was just so fast. It was like sort of like a streak, kind of like a crescendo across my eyesight. And I like froze because I am a huge coward. And so I just like froze and like waited to see if anything happened. And then one of my roommates who was staying in the other, there was 3 of us. And so the 2 of them were sleeping in the other room. He had like come down the hall. He's like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I don't know. Something really weird just happened." He said, "Yeah, I heard someone like running down the hall." And I was like, no one's up. I think something really, really bizarre just happened. And similar to like what all these stories have done, we like talked to our RD the next day. He's like, "Yeah, something's been going on very recently on like the south end of the dorm." So then like, of course, in like true Christian college fashion, we like prayed over that whole end of the dorm and like had a hall meeting, and we were like, let's like be aware of like spiritual warfare. And so that was the only incident of anything that even had happened. But the same thing, when other people kind of confirm exactly. So like him coming in and being like, "Hey, like what just happened?" For something that to me was so close, like I thought it was just happening like in my vision.
Right.
And then for him to experience it like down the hall and hearing it where I was seeing something.
Did you see? You haven't seen Hereditary yet, have you?
No.
Okay, because that's one of the effects that happens. It's almost exactly what you've just described.
Starring me, Tony Collette.
Just this like sort of this traveling flash of light where the people go, "Did something just happen?"
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And it was super weird because it was, and we talked about this in the episode where I saw something in the field.
Right.
Anytime light always really, I like notice it, like how it refracts or how it, bounces off. So the fact that my lamp light was on, but that it was like a dark flash in front of me, you know what I mean? Like whether it was because it was silhouetted behind my lamp or whatever was actually happening. Seeing like the darkness move was like what freaked me out the most. I was like, anything that's like light and dark, I really don't like that metaphor, I guess. But
it's interesting because as you were describing it, immediately I thought, because I occasionally get what are called classic auricular migraines, where it starts off where you see fluttering, and for those of you out in podcast land, I'm making jazz flutter fingers by my eye. Oh wait, hey,
if you're on Instagram,
flutter fingers.
I know. I looked over and saw the comments.
Hello. But and if I don't get like 3 Advil and a Diet Coke in me really quick, I'll go blind. I'll lose my sight for about 20 minutes where it's all just flashes of color. So immediately I thought, oh my God, I wonder if it was a migraine. And then you talk about the light moving across, and immediately I went, oh, well, the bright light, maybe he had a detached retina or a retina tear, because that's the flashes of light, because it magnifies.
And it's 2 a.m. and he's studying.
And you're
like,
with a freaking black light, you crazy boy.
I know.
But once again to go, oh wait, you weren't the only one that experienced this.
But that's what we like. I was doing all those same things. Like, no, you're tired. Like it's the window is open or something. You know what I mean? Like you just start going through every possible. What could this actually be? And because it didn't take any kind of form that I recognize, all movement and light based. Like now,
but it goes back to energy. Like this could have been that energy running down the hall, and that's the little peripheral piece you got.
In your defense too, every single story that you've shared, you always have someone next to you or a witness.
I know, it's really creepy.
Yeah, you always do.
Yeah,
especially
I would like that to stop.
Oh my God, you're like Danny in The Shining. You're the battery. You're the battery making it happen.
No, his story about
Billy can't talk to me now, Mrs. Torrance.
Yeah, it's a little creepy. So, of course, we all jump to like there's a demon like attacking the school. So really rational.
Do you guys have any phobias?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't think they're like full. They're not debilitating, right?
Right.
I think I have like minor arachnophobia. I can't like if any kind of like National Geographic where there's like a picture. You know how they'll do like the close-ups. Sorry, my mouth is actually getting a little dry.
Wow.
I'll give you a moment.
I'm surprised you don't have your juice.
I know. I slurped that down.
He had a Trenti this morning.
Trenti juice, Shelby.
Yeah. So any like close contact, like I can't touch the page that it's on, like in the magazine.
Oh, wow.
Or
That's
any like movie, like if you've seen the Lord of the Rings movies, when they're fighting the spider and he's touching the mandibles to keep it like off of him, I can't watch that scene at all. Or like Harry Potter, the Harry Potter ride where they come toward. God, I really.
Okay, you're like, okay, we'll give you a break.
You're gonna see a grown man cry today.
Maybe we needed safe words before we started today.
So, but it's not like debilitating. Like if I see a spider in real life, I'm very much like it has to go.
Right.
I'm not like paralyzed, but yeah, I can't do spiders.
Yeah. What about you, Tammy? You have anything?
No, I don't really have a phobia.
Oh man, you're fearless.
Like, I mean, height. I mean, I guess I have a fear of heights. Like, my palms get really sweaty. Like when I'm, like on a sky. Like, what is the name of that skyscraper in downtown? Is it the Chase Building or the?
It used to be the first.
You can do
Yes, I've gone to like the tippy top of the floor and like looking over the window. I'm like,
that's pretty common.
I don't like that.
That's
either.
so common.
Yeah. So I have one that is weird. It developed in high school, kind of out of nowhere, but I do not like to be in my car pulled up to the train tracks when a train is going by. I have this fear of being hit by a train while I'm sitting in my car. So I will park like 2 car lengths away and everyone behind me hates me. And I don't look at it and I turn the radio way up so I don't have to hear it. And it just in high school, like kind of developed out of nowhere. And then I dated a guy that lived right behind train tracks, and I think that sort of that exposure therapy kind of started to work for me where it's not as strong anymore. But I don't know what it was, but just I don't know.
So specific that it didn't come from like an incident or
and I can walk across train tracks or that doesn't bother me. Just being in my car, like I don't like to get near it. My husband will like kind of mess around as we're going to drive across. And
God.
When the arms are just going up or they're about to come down, my heart does not race as fast as it does when they're coming down. And I'm like, whoa, which way is it going? It's the worst. Scott, you have anything?
I have tons of irrational fears, but they're just so run-of-the-mill neuroses.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of phobias are based... I mean, the research says that a lot of phobias do have are somehow connected to a biological imperative. I remember being we were up on my family's sort of farm property when I was a little kid, and I was walking through sort of the forest in the back and came across a king snake. And they're enormous and they're completely harmless, except they're great. They like eat rats and stuff. But it was just, I remember as a little kid, like feeling it in my stomach as I saw the snake slither, and like for many years that like it bugged me, and it doesn't bother me now. Like I've got a picture, if you go through my Facebook feed, of when I was doing a show in Thailand years ago, and we went to the snake farm, and I have a boa constrictor laying on my shoulders, and I remember like, I may crap myself right now. Like it was, everybody, it was because it has such power. But there's a lot of research that says that that's a biological imperative, that we are wired to actually recognize things and be scared of things that can do us harm. Snakes. Sure. It's also why snake, particularly in the Christian belief system, it's like that's why they see it as evil, because desert snakes are dangerous.
Right.
There are no non-dangerous snakes that live in the desert.
Right.
They kill. Their venom is very powerful.
Can I just say, I thought you were going to say you were dancing with a boa constrictor?
No.
A la Britney Spears.
Yes. No, it'd be like Salma Hayek.
Pictures of this?
It was like Salma Hayek when Pandemonium Santana. That was such a great
scene. We gotta
scene.
find it and post it on Instagram.
Tammy can put your head on a Britney Spears body.
I will.
But what was
Get ready.
But you know what we were talking, because we looked it up, because there is a very common phobia that I'm not going to let you look at it. This will freak you out. Oh my gosh. But it's a very common phobia of randomly ordered holes.
Oh, yeah.
It's endurance.
Trypophobia.
My roommate thinks she has it, and she doesn't. Emily, if you're listening, that's right.
I mean, I didn't think it was a real thing until they go. If you want to check and see if you have this, Google the image seed pod and lotus seed pod. Lily pad. Okay, and I looked at it and I went, I looked at it a little too long, and the reasoning behind it is we are wired to recognize disease. And that's what Black Plague looked like. It's what
it's the open
wounds,
Yeah.
and so those holes immediately our brain sees that as like bad. Get away from this, contagious. Get away from it.
So since you and I talked about that on Thursday night, my friend Meha, hello, if you're listening, I know she is. She totally has it. They're doing construction in their home right now, and her husband. It's so specific to that. Her husband went home and took the little blue painter's tape and taped a bunch of things that he wanted fixed, and she got it just by looking at that pattern.
Wow.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. It's such a thing.
Tape.
I know. You gotta look up
when
the
she
images.
drives up to visit her family in Palo Alto, the hillsides have like those the pod plants. I can't remember what they're called. But even seeing those on the hillside, she sometimes has to like pull the car over and like breathe it.
It's
in.
so interesting.
Oh, I want
So
to learn
look,
more.
I want to.
Okay.
So to tie this to what we're talking about, I do believe that there's something out there. Look, it's 150 years ago. We didn't know what radioactive materials did. We didn't understand the concepts of radiation and X-rays. Look, and that's a subtle energy that we now have a great understanding for. The idea that we would be able to use the movement of electrons along a path turning into electricity to generate communication across vast distances, we could not have even imagined that, right?
Right.
I really believe, whether it is, and I don't really believe in the word supernatural because I don't think anything supersedes nature. There is only what we do not yet have an understanding of, right? So in 150 years or less, we may know, there's a remnant of this so-and-so energy that sticks around, and some people it stays longer. But that's what I find fascinating about these discussions is everybody takes these experiences around the world and they look at it, like you were saying, through their own lens, their own paradigm of understanding. And then you said something so beautiful in one of your podcasts I was listening to the other day, because it was very reminiscent of the opening of The Lord of the Rings that's narrated by Galadriel, which is Cate Blanchett. And she talks about truths. A truth starts out, and then it becomes history, and then it becomes legend, and then it becomes myth. It's all about just time, like how much time, and that game of telephone, of how some of the things change. We do that to ourselves. Okay, that experience was 30 years ago. What actually happened? Anyway, that's my long-winded rant. Like, that's why I'm so open to, I wish people did more rational explanation. I don't like James Randi. I think he's dead, but I think he's dead. He was not a nice man. He was not a nice man. But his goal was to debunk all of these phenomena. And he had the $1 million challenge. The only thing is that they would not answer all requests. Like, there are some legitimate healers that are studied by big time medical universities. There's phenomenon that, like, no, let's really research this.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the hauntings they've found, there's a commonality being over riparian rivers, so deep subterranean water. That movement causes vibration in all the stone in the earth, and if a house is built on top of it, it's going to change the electrical currents in the house. People are going to go, are they really feeling cold spots, or are they just kind of picking up on like dog energy, like how dogs sense things?
Right.
Well, I think as a society, we are so insulated from our more basic survival instincts, like you were talking about. And it's like this weird phenomenon where we have to like remind ourselves. We've talked about this so many times, like, trust your gut. Like, there's a reason your body is reacting these ways.
Yeah.
Like, when you need to run. When you need to fight. Like, do those things. But we're so like inundated with like non-survival influence, like it's on your phone, that when we do experience those things that are like more natural, more like primal urges, we like can't process them anymore.
Or even just I have to be so socially polite that I'm
Right.
not listening to that inner voice that's telling me not to be in this elevator alone with this person.
Right.
Hello, patriarchy and what women have been putting up
good. I
with
was
for
hoping
thousands
we'd
of years,
touch on this.
right? You know, without
yes.
going too far down that, but you hit it on the head. The idea that we do have this innate understanding for what is dangerous to us, and yet, and you and I, coming from the culture of the South, good Southern ladies don't complain, and good Southern ladies, you know, they don't get themselves into that kind of. Like, it was, anyway, okay,
no, we don't talk about
I'm going to
that.
push my soapbox back under.
That's all hogwash.
Yeah.
Well, should we jump into the exorcism?
Yes.
Well, I wanted to just, as we go into this, what I wanted to say a little bit about, which doing this research is so fantastic and fascinating. It's a total rabbit hole. But the idea of possession is in almost every culture. It's in some cultures more than others, but we have historical data about, priestesses that were dedicated to particular gods in the Roman and classical Roman and Greek eras, where possession was a gift. Possession was, the gods are touching you.
Yeah.
They are delivering a message to us through you, and that was seen as like, that means you were divinely touched. Epilepsy was called the touch of the god, or the touch of divinity, because they would be, look, he's having a seizure.
Yeah,
God didn't touch
I
him.
think we still do that with like people who speak in tongues, or like more Pentecostal kind of, like, that's so interesting.
Yeah,
It
except
really is in every culture.
Exactly. So they're like, why? It's interesting how it's like, when Mrs. Jones, who has a shingle on her front door and she does channeling to help people heal, that's of the devil. But when somebody's dancing around on a pulpit and speaking in tongues, it's like that's the. So it's interesting how we look at that, but it's in Judaism. It's not seen as positive in Judaism. It's usually, there's a great movie called The Dybbuk, which was about an evil spirit that possesses a little girl. So it's seen in Jewish folklore and the Kabbalah. It's called the Dybbuk. In Islam, Islam is very divided about it. Like I was reading a lot of articles where many imams are like, no, we don't talk. Let's not even acknowledge it. And then the other ones are like, no, historically and in our folklore, we do believe in possession by jinn. Which was what we call genie, but jinn, which are fire spirits, and they're pretty mischievous / evil. Even though there are versions of angels as well, but there's not a lot of stories about it except for sort of like rural village folklore that I was able to find. And then in Hinduism, there are spirits / demons that can engage in possession, as there is in Buddhism. But once again, it seems like the more organized and canonized the religion is, how it slides over to it's bad. Because you also see in the rise of voodoo and Santeria and sort of the African diaspora religions, the gods mounting you is a gift. Like that's what you go into trance states for. So the Loa will come and bless your body with their presence, and you're able to give healing to others and share this, in your practicing community. So it's interesting. It's all over the place, but it's all about that cultural lens. And the other sad thing is like how many deaths happen.
Yeah.
There are actually a lot of deaths that happen from exorcisms every year.
Right.
And that's in rural America. It's in Europe right now.
And how are those deaths being caused?
Because they beat the crap out of mentally ill people.
Gotcha.
They beat the crap out of them. They tie them up. There was a nun in Romania, and which is interesting because that's like the Nun movie is out. But in Romania in 2004, I think it was, a 23-year-old, what they call novices, were the so you're
Before
not
they've,
fully a nun.
It's
just this young woman, 23, had not taken her vows. We know that schizophrenia in women presents about 5 to 10 years later than it does in men.
Right.
And she starts having, all these psychotic break, hearing things, seeing things. They tie her up and hang her in a well for 3 days. Yeah, that's going to get rid of the spirit. And she died. It was a huge court case.
Oh, wow.
So I've actually seen an exorcism, and it was incredibly violent.
Ooh.
So, like, as soon as...
Where was it?
Indiana. So, yeah.
I remember this story.
You were present?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So, they were exorcising, quote-unquote, the demon of homosexuality from this guy that I knew. Sorry, I don't want to, like, say a ton of details, because, like, I don't want to, like, throw anyone under the bus.
Right.
But basically...
Did it work?
Girl, I mean, I would say no. But, like, I think, again...
I'm sorry, I don't know. No disrespect. And no disrespect to your friend, but, like,
No, it did not.
Just
like, that's just my
trigger.
Yeah,
trigger.
Sorry, this halo is busted.
And he even said, like, because... You know, we kind of did ask the same question, like, well, like, how do you feel now? He's like, now I think it's more a question of, like, the dog that I feed. Like, that old, like, myth of, like...
Which wolf.
Which wolf,
Yeah,
yes.
right.
So, no, it didn't work. But, and I think most of that was because in order to, quote, like, complete it or to, like, have it be successful, there had to be some kind of, like, physical manifestation, quote, unquote. This whole thing is in air quotes, just, like, so I can stop saying that. There had to be a physical manifestation of the demon, like, being removed from his body, but they were, like, CPRing on his stomach, like, full on, like, while they're, like, praying over him. So it's, like, that physical, like, exertion, and it's, like, super chaotic, and it was very, like, loud and violent until he threw up. And then, like, once he threw up, it was over. So, yes, like,
and that has
when you ask, like, how did people die?
That has hardly...
So violent.
Yeah.
Has hardly anything to do with the fact that they're fucking punching him in the stomach repeatedly.
Right, exactly.
I just,
the cognitive dissonance in that, like, experience was really aggressive. Like, even because, like, it was voluntary. Like, he was not forced into this exorcism. It wasn't that, like, he was possessed. It was just that he was being, like, afflicted by the demon of homosexuality, I think was the sort of terminology that was being used. And, you know, that was a choice he made, and he, like, moved forward in his life with, like, he got married, and he has children, and I think he's very happy. You know, I obviously don't want to, like, put judgment on anyone's life.
I mean, look, everybody has their choices in that respect. I mean, that is a choice. That is a choice to go against the way you're wired.
Yeah.
If that's what you choose, okay, but, you know, please don't, you know... Please give people a break that are not
adult by that point. Like, he wasn't being forced to do it or, like, held down or whatever. Like, he wasn't tied down. But that's as soon as you said, like, oh, that's how people die. Because, like, what if something had gone? There wasn't any kind of medical professional there watching this happen.
The exhaustion and
it delivers the question, like, is it Satan or psychosis? In my opinion, like, what is the difference? And that I was reading an article about a girl in Islam who. I think she almost died because the practitioner confused, like, her mental health symptoms. She was suffering from, like, bipolar disorder, and she was also, I think she suffered from anxiety, and the parents they weren't educated in, like, mental health. So they took her to a practitioner, and the guy, like, reads the Quran, gives her this liquid, puts his 2 fingers down her throat until she vomits and she blacks out. And it was a big article, and this is how they handle these things. Like, this is why people die because
Scott deals with this all the time at work.
Oh my God.
Trying to get people resources. And
and trying, you know, because we have such a diverse population here, and there's various levels of education and understanding, and there are so many medical, like Huntington's disease and Tourette's. I mean, God help you in the Middle Ages if you had Tourette's. Like, you were either going to be the court jester or you're a demon child, and they're going to, or a witch. They'll burn you. And then, you know, we don't think about the historical context of trauma as much as we do. Now we have more of a vocabulary that's sort of in the vernacular. People have at least an understanding for dissociation, for the idea that if you traumatize someone, they can have a dissociative state where they'll wake up and go, wait, what happened? What's been going on for the last week or the last month or whatever? You know, historically, if that's happened, this other comes out, the protective, like we talk about in dissociative identity disorder, that would have been seen as possession. But, God help people with
in The Exorcist.
Exactly. Right. That's what, with the true story with Robbie Mannheim or Roland Doe, that was one of the symptoms they labeled him as. Sure. Alongside Tourette's, alongside what else? Dissociative identity disorder, and even schizophrenia. Mm-hmm. They try to diagnose him with that, but not the case. Wow. Not the case here. Not here.
Well, let's move on. Tell us, because I'm fascinated now. I watched that horrible documentary, Haunted Boy.
Yes, I was like, I am sorry, it's a little hokey, but they got the story.
Yeah, and some things in it are really well done. What's crazy to me is the reenactments, although a little cheesy, are actually really well done. Yeah. And then they're filmed well. It's like they're really painting a picture. And I know I'm going to burn for this. But, look, dude, why does every paranormal investigation team have to look like a bunch of buffoons? Dude, cut that greasy ponytail off. Get yourself a buff puff.
Yeah.
They all look on. If I had $1 for every Affliction shirt or Gothic cross or something, I could buy a house here.
Ed Hardy, sort of. But it's like, you have spent close to $250,000 on the equipment. I can see how much you've invested in equipment.
Right. Right.
Get a makeover. Yeah,
get a mirror. Buy a $2 mirror.
Oh my god!
And look, and I'm saying, I know it sounds cruel, and I apologize. Because I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. I'm just saying, right. And if you want to be taken seriously, right? So going through these buildings in the middle of the night with a leather cowboy hat and a duster and gloves with hot topic jewelry. Come on. Okay.
Take that pretty serious. Yeah,
look, he wanted to be extra. Making ghost hunting extra as fuck, all right?
Now I feel bad. Is he going to listen to this and be upset?
I really doubt it. I think
Thanks for listening.
He's still shopping for more leather cowboy hats and dusters right now online. Amazon Prime that,
We'll wake up tomorrow why do we have 0 subscribers? What happened? They're all love Ed Hardy. Sorry, Ed Hardy. Thank you.
I guess what we can do is start with the history of this, how we do in our podcast. In order to begin, we need to go back to 1949. And let's go back to 1949 in Washington, D.C., but let's start off, what is an exorcism and what is an exorcist? So, based on Wikipedia, of course, and the Catholic Church, exorcism and the Catholic Church seem inseparable, thanks to films like The Exorcist and The Exorcism of Emily Rose, as well as the Church's own proclamations of exclusivity. But in reality, the earliest evidence of exorcism predates Christianity by hundreds and hundreds of years. As we discussed, and exorcists have been a part of religious practices worldwide for ages, including among witches and Satanists that the church blames for every single current demon infestation and negative thing in the world.
The church does love blaming people. That's
they
really
love quoting.
Yeah.
Put simply, exorcism is the expulsion of an unwanted force or energy from a person, place, or thing that is afflicted by the energy in the extreme. A person who is possessed by such a force lacks self-control as a result of that possession. And an exorcist comes in and he specializes in casting out these entities. So if you or a loved one isn't a linguist and starts quoting dead languages, reeking of sulfur or anything rotting, and is levitating, an exorcist could be helpful alongside possibly a shrink or having Dr. Scott or Dr. Shallow get involved in it,
A shower.
That's not my
shower, taking out the trash.
No, I won't be doing that.
I don't like working with that population.
So William Blatty in 1971 wrote a book, which later became a film called The Exorcist. When the movie came out, it portrayed a small girl as being possessed by the devil, when in reality, it was a small boy in 1949 who was labeled Roland Doe or the Haunted Boy.
Wait, so was a little girl possessed by Roland?
Oh, it's like Inception.
Ooh, now it gets deep. It gets really deep. So the story, it's the true story of The Exorcist, begins in 1949 in suburban Washington, D.C. So let's paint a picture of 49 in D.C. Harry S. Truman will deliver his inaugural address, or what they call the 4-point speech, The U.S. is emerging from the shadows of World War II. The Whitehurst Freeway opens, connecting Arlington, Virginia, and D.C. for commuters, and WTOP-TV begins broadcasting. So with the family name Hunkler, this was in the beginning, this was their cognito name, but what I found out through Troy Taylor's book, The Devil Came to St. Louis, they were called the Mannheims. So their 13-year-old boy, believed to be named Ronald, and then later referred to synonymously as Roland Doe, but we find out later that his name is Robbie, was despondent over the loss of his beloved Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist who taught him many things, including how to tap into that hotline bling of the Ouija board.
Of course.
So
No.
a lot of people believe Harriet was into Satanism. No, she was just a spiritualist. She loved to study and learn more about the occult. She did work with the Ouija board. She knew how to operate it. But she did this in front of Roland or Robbie. And Robbie just was so enamored with it that he thought, oh, you just put your fingers on the planchette and just let it go. So just as a side note, the Ouija board was a game based on the witch board brought out by Parker Brothers. Now, the Ouija name is derived from two different types of languages, French and German. Oui for ja, yes. Ja for yes as well in German. So if Bryce were to have a game based off of Ouija, it would be called No or No McDucket.
Yeah.
But it was also be said that spirit boards have been around for a long time.
Centuries,
There's been all different versions of it. It was a very big deal. This was like you were saying in one of your earlier podcasts in the Sarah Winchester.
Yes.
This is parlor game. This was how
there
weren't radios. It's let's unwrap a mummy. They used to do that. Let's have a mummy party,
That cannot be sanitary.
Back then was anything sanitary?
I don't think so.
They used it. In Victorian times, they used mummy dust as medicine. They thought, this will be. Let's try taking this.
That would be my phobia.
Sorry.
How has the human race survived this long?
It's a miracle.
We should use radium as makeup. Why are we alive?
Oh my god!
What?
But what Ouija specialists have stated, the board is not good or evil. It all depends on the person and their intention. Auntie Harriet, they believe, was tapping into the 666 hotline with little Roland, but really, who knows? We weren't there. So on Saturday, January 15th, this is where literally all hell breaks loose. January 15th, 1949. Keep this date in mind because we'll touch on it very soon. Phyllis Mannheim went out for the evening with her husband, leaving Robbie and his grandmother Wagner at home in the house. Shortly afterwards, a dripping sound ensued and would not stop, despite the fact that every faucet was checked in the house in an attempt to locate the origin of the dripping noise. Both Mannheim and his grandmother noticed that a painting of Christ began to shake uncontrollably against the wall. Later, when the parents arrived home, the dripping activity ceased, and a new noise was heard in forms of raps and scratching.
Oh wait, so who's witnessing this?
This is Roland or Robbie.
So Robbie and
the grandmother.
Okay, so they're witnessing it, and they're reporting it to the family members who come back, right?
Exactly.
Back from their
when the
night.
parents come back, the dripping noise stops, but then they hear scratches. So now the parents and everyone, the whole family, is hearing the scratching sound. So in an attempt to locate the origin of the sound, the dad begins to tear off floorboards. He rips down wall panels to locate, what type of rodent or animal is making this noise. Nothing is making the noise. They don't find anything. So in January of 26, 11 days after the beginning of the scratching sounds and the water drips, Robbie's Aunt Harriet died in St. Louis. Devastating Robbie, the boy consequently tried. This is what happens. He tried to contact his Aunt Harriet via Ouija board. Of course.
It's like the Twilight Zone where the little boy has the toy phone and he's talking to his favorite grandmother. Oh, that's
exactly
crazy.
I like it.
Robbie was very close to Aunt Harriet. Aunt Harriet treated Robbie like a friend, not like a nephew. So Robbie thought, let me grab the board to contact Aunt Harriet. You see, Aunt Harriet knew how to open and close a session. Robbie didn't.
Which is very important in that work.
Very important.
People don't talk about that. That's a big Aleister Crowley thing.
Yes.
Do you know about that story?
Yes.
That's fascinating. We'll have to do another.
That is another episode that we would we would have to segue for another hour talking about that.
It's creepy.
Guys, just Google it.
Yeah.
So Robbie grabs the board attempts to make communication. He does. He attempts to make a great communication with who he thought was Aunt Harriet, but he didn't close the session. So this led to demonic possession.
So,
people believe.
And just for the audience,
Yes.
the idea when we were saying close the session, the idea is that in this work, you're opening a door, and then you're also, when you're done, you got to close that door,
Right.
or else it stays open. There's leakage. So it's about resealing.
And I wonder why she wouldn't have like talked to him or like explained that to him.
You would think, right? Because with that much experience. But anyway,
Well,
like we said, we don't.
maybe she did, and he's
And he's a kid, so maybe it's
grief.
I think she was lonely and needed a friend.
Yeah.
That was it. Like, she was lonely and needed a friend. Auntie Harriet wasn't married. And Auntie Harriet
a
didn't...
woman in the 40s unmarried?
I know.
Gas.
In St. Louis?
Oh, so she was possessed. I see. Got it.
There you go.
she's a hussy.
Only explanation. Got it.
So things escalate.
You're perfect for a school teacher. You'll never get married.
So the most troubling thing was at night. It started at night. Right after the session, Robbie's mattress would suddenly move violently and shake, followed by a strange force that would attack him. Soon, Robbie would violently lash out, speak in foreign tongue. His parents didn't know how to control him, what was causing him to go into these spells, as they call it. They just didn't know what to do. They were isolated, disturbed, and helpless. The family sought help from every single expert they could find. They consulted with doctors and psychiatrists who diagnosed him with schizophrenia and Tourette's, and soon they go seek the advice of their local Lutheran minister, but no one was of help. The minister suggested that the family seek the assistance of the Jesuits, so the Catholic Church. So Father E. Albert Hughes, the local Catholic priest, asked his superior's permission to perform an exorcism on the boy in late February of 49. However, Hughes stopped the rite when Roland, or Robbie, broke off a piece of spring from the mattress and attacked the priest, slashing one of his arms across the shoulders. So the priest is physically attacked. He is given 100 stitches for...
Jeez.
It was really
Whoa.
bad, causing him to have permanent damage. So he lost all feeling in his right shoulder. He couldn't raise up his right arm anymore. So during his sermons, he couldn't raise up both arms. He can only raise up his left. So a few days later, red scratches appeared on the boy. One of the scratches formed the word Louis, which indicated to Robbie's mom that the family needed to go to St. Louis, where Auntie Harriet lived and passed, and also where they had relatives, in a way to figure out how to save their son. Unfortunately, Robbie did not improve in St. Louis. His aunt and uncle, who lived in Normandy, they lived in a small house off of Roanoke Drive. We'll get to that soon, because that house plays into effect, too, with the paranormal aftermath.
I just want to know if he had Lewis across. If they had looked under his arm, it would suffer.
Yeah.
I mean, how old did you say he was?
13.
Okay, so I'm just thinking, how much, if he was an athletic kid, because, yes, you can do damage with a sharp object, but to go that deep, to do that much nerve damage,
It was pretty...
you had intent. There was,
Hughes was like, I'm out.
Yeah.
Tap me out. Bye. Especially after that episode, there was documentation that he did suffer from PTSD after this whole attempt of his exorcism on Robbie. So it just seemed like it didn't, nothing improved after they went to St. Louis.
So he's in the midst of all of this possession. They pick him up, move him from D.C. to St. Louis.
Exactly. They have family there. They stay with the family in their little house off of Roanoke. Okay. The family, it's a good thing that they're staying with the family, because now the family, their aunt, uncle, and cousin, they're witnessing skin branding on Robbie as well. They see the mattress and bed shaking on many occasions. On March 8th of 1949, the shaking of the mattress and scratching still persisted. A stool that was sitting near the bed was seen flying across the room in Robbie's cousin's room. So the cousin and Robbie were sharing a room together. The cousin was so sweet. He was so concerned about the shaking of the bed and Robbie that he even tried laying down on the bed beside him to get the mattress to stop shaking.
Wow. Okay.
To his dismay, of course, it didn't work. Finally, one of the relatives who attended St. Louis University went to see her old teacher, Reverend Raymond J. Bishop. She asked him if he might be able to assist Robbie, and while we have no idea what his initial reply may have been, he did agree to look into the case. But it was Bishop who brought in William Blatty into the case. Father Blatty would be the head priest to perform the entire series of exorcisms. There wasn't one, there was a series of them on Robbie. But he wasn't doing this alone. He had the help of Father Bishop, Father Lawrence Kenny, and Father Charles O'Hara and Father O'Halloran. They needed a team of priests because this boy was haunted as fuck. So the exorcism apparently started at the home of their aunt and uncle off of Roanoke Drive. The priest came in late one evening after Robbie went to bed. The ritual began. The boy was said to go into a trance. His bed shook and welts and scratches appeared on his body. Bishop was said to have wiped away the blood that welled up in the scratches, while O'Hara attempted to hold the boy down. Soon the boy was taken to the Alexian Brothers Hospital. It was the main hospital where Robbie was sent after the first series of exorcisms. Now, there was even mention that he was even transferred to another hospital, St. Vincent Hospital. We'll get into that soon with the paranormal aftermath, because there's still some weird juju with this hospital that was turned into an apartment complex that has a lot of weird things.
That was, that was very interesting.
Yeah. So Robbie was sent to Alexian Brothers. He was placed on the 5th floor at both locations, at both the Alexian Brothers and the the St. Vincent Hospital. So the ordeal continued.
Sorry, he was placed on the 5th floor at both places?
At both
I have that written down too.
Ew.
I was like, question mark?
Which is
right?
weird, isn't
Why
it?
does that creep me out so much?
I have no idea.
Oh,
and I even looked into it too. Like, why the 5th floor? Why? But the ordeal continued for many weeks, and through many readings of the exorcism ritual, I mean, nothing was working for poor Robbie. According to witnesses, the boy's responses became more violent and repulsive as time went on. He was said to speak in Latin in a variety of voices, in between bouts of screams and curses. He spat in the faces of priests who knelt and stood by his bed, and his spittle and vomit struck them from uncanny distances. He punched and slapped priests and witnesses and staff members of the hospital. He consistently urinated, and he belched and passed gas that was said to have had an unbelievable stench, which could have been a form of bad IBS, in my opinion.
Well, I was going to say. Look,
He is a teenage boy, right?
Are we sure that he's not just going through puberty?
I know.
Like, this all just sounds like puberty. I don't know.
So there was a diary, and it was a little book came out called The Exorcist Diary by Christopher St. Booth and Father Bishop. So based on this diary, on Monday, April 8th at 8 a.m., Robbie wakes up in a spell, spitting, kicking, and jumping. The priest performed a communion on Robbie by 11 a.m., and finally between the hours of 9:30 and 10 p.m., Blatty led Robbie into prayer with Robbie's rosary. By 10:45, Blatty delivered the Principio, the final order. He's done this several times before, but this time it clicked. He asked the other priests to deliver them in English and not in Latin this time. While Blatty delivered Principio, Father Bishop used over and over again the exorcism prayer to St. Michael, causing Robbie to deliver the most violent contortions during the last 8 minutes of exorcism. By 11 p.m., Robbie became normal and in a calm and normal tone told priests he's gone. Keep in mind that on 11 p.m., this was the same time the manifestations began in Maryland on January 15th of 1949. So, what happened to Robbie after this whole ordeal? According to Troy Taylor's book, The Devil Came to St. Louis, Robbie left St. Louis with his parents 12 days later and returned to Maryland. He wrote to Father Blatty in May of 49 and told him that he was happy. He got a new dog. Robbie was normal. He was a typical teenage boy of the 40s. Now, Robbie went on to attend a Catholic high school. The family also converted to Catholicism, and he's still a devout Catholic to this very day. And he went on to get married and raise children of his own. He still resides in D.C., and there were a number of rumors that swirled around about this poor man, that he committed suicide. He was even an American Airlines pilot, which is all untrue. However, the identity of Robbie Rainham may never be revealed. However, he has reported of having no memory of being possessed. To psychiatrists, Robbie Doe or Rob Doe or Roland Doe suffer from mental illness, and to priests it was a case of demonic possession. To writers and film video producers, this was a great way to exploit his story for profit.
Sure.
And that is the story of Robbie Mannheim or Roland Doe, the haunted boy.
It would be so fascinating if somebody could speak to him now, if he would be willing to go
They've
on
tried.
And I'm sure he doesn't want him.
He
like, they want
yeah.
to just be, especially if he has, if that has now become his belief system and this is his faith, he doesn't want to revisit that. He doesn't want to open that door again.
No.
Let's ask him. He's our special guest.
Yes. What happened to the hospital and to the homes? Well, the original home in D.C. where Robbie and the family lived has been demolished. So the house was abandoned in the 60s and they tore it down. So it was a vacant lot. The hospital, the Alexian brothers, was torn down in 1978. But before it was torn down, Bowden gave strict orders to seal off not only the room where the exorcism was performed, but the whole 5th floor. There was also legend in St. Louis that strange happenings or something happened during demolition. And according to crew members who worked for the Department of Transportation, something was seen emerging from the room just moments before the wrecking ball claimed it. Whatever it was, the men claimed that it looked like a rat or a big cat or something. It was just inhuman. So in recent years, another stranger version of the fate of the items within the exorcism room has come to light. So Father Bowden not only instructed the nuns of the hospital to seal off the rooms, but anything that was left in the room during and after the exorcism needed to stay in the room. Everything from the bed, the bedding, the chair, the desk, the lamp, everything, including the diary, or what they call the Diary of the Deliverance. So the chairs and everything had been moved away to a basement in a rectory in St. Louis. That rectory was torn down and they were moved later to another location. There was also the diary that was collected. You see, when an exorcism is performed by the Roman Catholic Church, there's always a written file or profile based on the exorcism, like a court trial or the exorcism files. What they call these files are the Diary of the Exorcism, or what Bowden called the Diary of the Deliverance. So the diary was recorded with accounts that were also found by workmen inside the room, inside the desk. They thought that the paperwork was forgotten. But they had found a letter attached to the diary. And that letter, that portion of the letter read, "The enclosed report is a summary of this case which you have known for the past several years. The brothers' part of this case has been so very important that I thought you should have the case history for your permanent file. It was signed by Father Raymond J. Bishop, the Jesuit priest from St. Louis University. Apparently, Brother Cornelius considered the record best kept in secret inside the sealed-off room, but the papers were turned over later to a local Jesuit priest, and they've been kept within, that community. St. Vincent's Hospital, where it was one of the stops for Robbie, was turned into an apartment complex. Tenants of the apartment complex have complained to the manager that they have felt what seems like someone coming into the room and sitting at the foot of their bed late at night. They would wake up, turn on the light, and it looks like someone had left an impression, like a seated impression on the foot of the bed.
Like their butt spot.
Yes, their butt impression, but no one would be in the room, so they would freak out. Now, here's a really interesting fact. The little house on Roanoke Drive where Robbie's aunt and uncle lived in Normandy was sold in 2005 for $165,000. Now, the occupants or the owners of the home, the reason why they bought the house was because on the listing it said Satan's home for sale. And it was the home of what they claimed the Exorcist. So
and did those people wear cowboy hats and Hot Topic?
Yeah.
No, they do
imagine?
look like they work for Hot Topic.
Gotcha.
They have claimed that they've had some unexplainable occurrences that have happened to them. They've heard door slamming, heavy footsteps, even cold spots in the second floor, especially in the room where Robbie had stayed and had his exorcism. And even neighbors have stated that while the house was vacant for many, many years, they would see a strange shadowy figure in the second floor window. Ghost Adventures Destination America have investigated the house where they collected EVPs that have read All Dead, Fuck You, Legion, and Devil. Not to mention that even in the Alexian Brother Hospital, too, after the exorcism occurred and after they had sealed off the 5th floor, there have been claims of hearing screams, door slamming, and heavy footsteps in that room. When people would go and check on the floor and the room was still tightly sealed off. No one was there. So that is pretty much the paranormal aftermath of The Exorcist.
There's so many places that they moved this boy around.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah, it got so bad. Like, the hospital's like, you got to move him somewhere else.
You're disturbing the other patients.
It's smelling really bad in here.
That's what's so crazy, too, is I feel like so many times we talk about places or, like, the energy or the spirit or whatever you want to call it is attached to the location. Mm-hmm. But this is, like, moving with him and, like, different family members are collaborating. And
so the thing that I find fascinating, and I was, as much as I am fascinated by this material, I love when I when I am educated on a new concept or a concept that I was unaware of before. So we talked a little bit before in our other podcast about how much I love these two Aussies that do Mysterious Universe.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know them?
Yeah.
They're hilarious, and they talk about high strangeness all over the world, kind of like, Art Bell did. I don't know if you guys remember Art Bell's radio show?
Oh my God,
okay.
Yes.
So one of the things that they talk about at length is they have story. Have you ever heard the term tulpa? Tulpa? Okay, so a tulpa is it's based on sort of it's based on Tibetan Buddhist, but older than Buddhism, like old, ancient Tibetan philosophies and theosophy, that a tulpa is a thought form, and you can create a thought form. You create it by visualizing it, and it's the old way that people would call a spirit to be their servant. When we talk about sort of magic workers or mystics, from several thousand years ago, or when it started. And they kind of talk about this, and there's a lot written about it, that when a concept comes into being, whether it is fictional or it's actually based in some history, that the more thought energy that is put towards that idea, the more it is realized into the material world.
Oh, yeah.
So you can create a tulpa, but you can, like we were talking about with the wonderful Aleister Crowley story, is you got to take it apart after you've played with it for a while, because if you don't, it's no longer yours, you become its. So they say in the idea of, different deities and divinities and different religions is because hundreds of thousands of people were putting their energy to this thought form that then becomes its own thing and has its own power. So in relationship to something like this, how many people have now, if you watch that The Haunted Boy documentary, everybody in Baltimore is up on that story. Oh, right? Yeah. They're all know, this is what happened, and we all know this. So they themselves, that energy substantiates the reality of this. I'm just saying, so I don't know what actually happened. Everything in there can a lot of, let's say the majority of everything that you have given us could be explained from a rational standpoint, except for the bed shaking that is witnessed by an adult, if we can trust his story, right? The guy that gets into bed with Robbie and the bed is still shaking. The other stuff, look, you can make, and they have documented this, you can make your skin break out in letters if you concentrate. There are people around the world that can manifest that without scratches. I mean, that's a phenomenon. It's very rare, but it does happen. So I don't know. That's the thing that fascinates me about this, is that we co-create these experiences. And I believe
we've talked about that so many. I think in my need to rationalize things, before I can say it's a ghost or a spirit or a demon, I always take a pit stop at but maybe everyone. I didn't realize there was even a term for it, but if everyone is coming to a designated haunted spot or something, and they're all bringing that energy. We talk about this with the mansion and with planners and all of that. If everyone's coming hoping and wanting and believing that they're going to experience, eventually that energy being poured in will, like you said, manifest into that. And that always gives me so much comfort. We did this. We did it to ourselves. And then it's not scary something. It's a little safety measure that I always kind of I think almost every episode at the end when we say what do you think happened, I almost always err on the side of we probably generated this, and then it you said took on a life of its own. I don't know why that gives me such comfort, but it does.
Hey.
Yeah, I know, right?
Whatever makes you sleep at night.
Yeah. I also just want people to get help. I mean, like when the idea of, and we had mentioned this during our coffee break, the idea that there are, there are organizations out there. I think it's at Bob Layton Ministries or something, and he is an exorcist for hire, and he's taking money from people to exorcise the demon of gambling and the demon of addiction, and those are serious life challenges. But how did that become this? Right. How did something that if you talk to a Jesuit priest about the concept of exorcism, they're going to say, this is really serious stuff. You don't mess with it. And then you've got sort of television evangelicals out there, making it into this dog and pony show. Yeah. That seems like really insulting to me. I don't know. That's just my take.
Well, you touched on it. They have to get permission.
Yes.
They can't just do an exorcism. You have to ask.
Oh, it goes through so many levels. Yeah.
But that, like what you said, there's all these other people that come in and they turn it into a dog and pony show. Look at Hollywood; they turn it into a dog and pony show as well. There's a total of 364 demonic exorcism inspired based movies. Based on this stuff. Yeah, it is still a good business. And I feel like maybe this really did happen to him. I believe in exorcism. I believe that there is a light and there's a dark, there's a good and an evil, and sometimes they just find this loophole to get into our world and manifest somehow.
We also have the concept in psychology of cathartic, of a cathartic experience of that, allowing emotions to come to the surface and to address trauma in an experience that in itself is traumatic, but it's a traumatic release. It is a catharsis, a release of energy. That to me plays into the concept for probably many cultures. I mean, if you look at more, in the same way that mental illness is dealt with in some sort of third world countries or generally non-first world countries, it's it does work because the belief system is that it's going to heal this. We're going to take this pain away from you by this ritual, and there is relief from it. But when the documentaries that I was watching, it's this one woman in Italy who's had 24 exorcisms, and it's oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know what's going on there, but she's in pain, and I'm like, whatever this is your guys are doing is not working, or are you making it worse? Is she mentally ill? And you are,
enabling it.
You're enabling it. I deal with this on a daily basis when we're working with kids that need to be hospitalized, and yet the hospital is a more stable environment than their home is. So now we've just created so they go to now they want to go to the hospital all the time because that's the only safety that they know.
Yeah, that's how they know. What happens when you feel pain or you feel bad? You go to the doctor. You go to the hospital.
Right.
If say, hypothetically, you guys were in the 40s. You guys were doctors in the 40s. Let's go into this. Mistaking mental health for demonic possession. Is it Satan or psychosis? He was taken to psychiatrists, and he was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, Tourette's syndrome, schizophrenia. Some people even hinted that he could have been sexually abused.
Well,
trauma.
There's trauma right there. What would your hypothesis be on this? What would your claim be on Robbie Mannheim if Robbie Mannheim was sitting in your office at 13 years old?
Well, I think first we'd have to take away about 30% of the education we have because we know so much more. I'm talking the royal we of our
from the 40s.
From the they were killing psychiatry at that time, and I'm talking psychiatry as opposed to psychology, which is if they're coming from a medical perspective, a mental health perspective, then they're going to try and medicate it. The medications back then were brutal. There was barely anything. I think there was Thorazine, that just turns you into a zombie. So today it's hard to imagine. And that's also Tourette's, schizophrenia. Those are three completely different areas of diagnosis. They're not even
absolutely. Well, and if you take this kid to an expert, whether it's a religious expert or a medical expert or a psychiatric expert, that expert is going to be looking at it through their lens, right? Mm-hmm. So the psychiatrist isn't necessarily going to say, and I know this is depicted in the movie kind of as their last-ditch effort, oh, have you consulted with a religious expert yet?
Yeah.
You know? So they're going to try and, again, like make it
as they're
fit.
smoking.
That's
one of the most hilarious things in the movie. Like the doctor's chain smoking in the hospital.
It's just scenes of people asking each other for cigarettes.
I know.
Exorcist.
The Exorcist, sponsored by Marlboro.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they were, because back then people were smoking in offices and bathrooms and airplanes. So you're trying to find something that fits, that is through your lens of whatever your expertise is in. And the presentation that's being described, I don't know. I mean, I in working with offenders, I would look at malingering and is this child making this up to get attention for some reason? Maybe it does come back to trauma. But yeah, I think I would have to kind of rule that out first, that he is doing this for some reason. And maybe it's not even a psychiatric issue.
You know,
that's where I would go to first.
Yeah, are you guys familiar with the McMartin preschool hearings? It's fascinating case for me, and even today, there's a lot of law enforcement is split over it. Like all the law enforcement in the beach community where this happened, they are convinced that the family that owned this daycare were brutalizing children. It didn't happen. No, you guys, it did not happen.
Oh, okay.
It was all. I mean, that's a whole episode in itself. And even about 9 years ago, the lead kid that his mother started the whole investigation. And he was their main witness. He came forward in a New York Times Magazine article and said, I lied. I lied. None of this stuff happened. That there were no satanic rituals. I saw it on a TV movie of the week on ABC. And you can go back and corroborate at that time when he was like 4 years old.
Oh my God.
4 or 5 years old, that there was this TV movie on at that time. But the other kids think they were traumatized because they were interviewed so badly.
Right.
And the idea that, people, if like Charlotte was saying, it's about the lens that you're looking through in that area of expertise. And they were lucky. A lot of lives were traumatized about this. But, he did it for attention. He comes forward and he says, my parents were fighting all the time. There was a divorce and I got attention. Like this was a way to get it. So he just kept creating a story and more a story.
And I think that happened. So I think that's such a historical precedent for that. Like you look at the Salem witch trials and these very young women who had no voice in normal society suddenly are being listened to by the authorities from big cities. It's a complete reversal of power.
Something totally outlandish.
100%. Yeah. And now you have control over the adults that are causing, quote, your trauma or your ability to have control.
Right.
How far you continue that.
The most disempowered part of that society finds a way to take control.
And so I think that part makes a lot of sense. Where it's if he did have something that he felt out of control about, and this kid in the daycare case, I just kept lying because I was continuing to get power, attention, whatever it ends up being.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to say. I mean,
I wonder what the break was then. If we go with that premise of then why at this time? It always weirds me out that it was both at 11. That's super weird.
It was. To come to the conclusion that normal psychological explanations can be delivered, but they cannot account for the clean events that happen. Dispatches, the horrific urination, vomiting, and the weird smells.
Puberty, yes.
I was going to say, Bryce and I are just going to chalk it up to puberty.
But here's the thing, he cannot remember anything. That's so creepy. with the
maybe because he lied, he doesn't want to. He's like, leave me alone, I can't remember.
Or trauma, like you were saying, sexual trauma.
Yeah. If there is sexual,
and then have gone into a dissociative fugue, which is we'll be talking about in one of our upcoming episodes when we discuss the sinner. But the idea he could actually have been abused horribly and gone into a dissociative state to protect his underlying ego, and been acting out in so many ways against that kind of trauma, we will never know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
if chairs are flying across the room and as it is written was really happening, I'd just be like, here's my license. I'm not practicing.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Well, okay, but what's the other
like,
really famous possession poltergeist one? It's
Emily
the kid
Rose.
No, this is the one in Germany.
Oh.
The girl in Germany. Because this one was highly investigated, and scary shit was happening. I mean, it was either Germany or England. Just lump Europe together. But
The Enfield Poltergeist.
yes,
That one, yes.
Are you familiar with that one?
Very familiar.
Okay,
That
so
was
they
the second
broke
Conjuring, I think, or
Yes.
because they broke all that stuff down. I mean, there were dishes flying, and then
Oh, Jesus.
tumblers falling right on cue.
Oh no!
You okay, Brandon?
so
It's demonic. It's demonic.
I'm gonna just grab my coffee
I know.
and leave.
if you could see how loud everything got in the visual representation of our recording
Yeah,
program.
there's a lot of photograph evidence, the recordings, everything. Ed and Lorraine Warren were involved.
Yeah.
But additional there was a documentary that was really fantastic because they started hiding cameras across the street to look in her window, the young woman, and she's throwing stuff. Like the minute, because what she would set something to fall off a shelf, and as soon as it fell off and the adults flinched and didn't look, then she would throw more and then fall down and throw more. And they would show her jumping off her bed and kind of freezing in midair, not freezing, but holding this weird contorted shape. And then people interpreted that as she was flying around the room. And I mean, I think it's, once again, it's interpretation and making sure that we're really looking at it with a hard eye.
Yeah.
Get a Tinder. If you need attention this bad, get a Tinder. This is ridiculous. I'm gonna break my silverware, and they're gonna have to pay attention.
There
and then you have to
wasn't
go
those ways to do that.
That's true. I know. Man, Tinder really has saved us from so much
Technology.
Possession.
Goes up and
Well, let's go into this. Like I mentioned before, a book was written in 1971, and then in 73 or 74, The Exorcist comes out.
That old so-and-so.
That old movie. And you have info on that.
Yes. It's a movie called The Exorcist. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks. We're done.
So I'm just going to talk a little bit because I think we've talked about people, whether it was the studio trying to sell more tickets to their movie, or whether it was true, or whether it was people being afraid of the original story and then manifesting it. The theory and the myth was that the set was haunted and cursed.
right.
And then that sort of generates all of this extra fear around this already terrifying movie.
Group hysteria.
Yes. So
Best way to put it.
Basically, I'm just going to go through. I have a list here of alleged incidences that happened on set, and then in the post production of shooting.
Okay.
So as you said, it's based on the book. Sorry, this is a listicle, so I'm gonna have to scroll and read it, and I cannot do two things at once.
The director, who was the director? William, we were debating Friedkin? Freaking.
That old crazy person. So basically, he discovered this story. It had already been published, and he read it and won the rights to produce a film. And he essentially was a lesser sane version of an Alfred Hitchcock, where he really was about the method and getting genuine responses from people.
Oh my god, yeah.
Which, as you know, I hate. I think the method is the worst.
I love hearing you guys bring up the method.
It's
The method. Tell me how you really feel, Brett.
Yeah, really not about it. Especially when it's a director imposing it on people.
Oh, right. Yeah. Instead of it being actual choice of someone.
So, especially because the little girl is so young.
12,
it's psychological trauma. Poor Linda Blair. She really did it.
She grew up to have a lot of problems, too.
Yeah. So he basically, a lot of the incidences were as a result, in my opinion, of his aggressive directing style, where he was pushing people to get a quote more genuine reaction. So there's a lot of things. For the priest at the end, the very famous monologue, he slapped him allegedly. I don't want to get sued. and like then said action. And so the priest, you see him, he's like really shooken and he's like crying a little bit. It's because he just got like hit. And he did that to like several of the actors where he would like yell at them or attack them in some way and then start rolling the camera, which is just so asinine.
Trust your actors and their ability. I mean, or
hire better actors. Like if it's not working, hire better
He had problems with working with other, like Gene Hackman. Like during the French Connection, like they were constantly fighting.
Oh really?
Oh yeah.
Poor Gene.
And he put Gene through a very like rigorous like car chase scene. It was a famous car chase scene that had no safety net or anything. Or it was like, here's a walkie-talkie. I'm going to walk you through this. We have no safety barriers. Wow. Go. Yeah. So there you go.
So as they start shooting, he's this very toxic set. And they actually have to delay shooting because the entire house set catches on fire.
Oh, right.
So it delays shooting for 6 weeks. And allegedly, the room that was the main set, like her room, was the only part that didn't burn. Which, like, whether that's true or not...
It's because it was so cold in there.
It was because... I think it's because it was so cold.
It was really cold.
So that was one of the things, is that they had 3... air conditioning units in that room to keep it so cold, and so it was like freezing the condensation in the room. I think that's why it wouldn't have burnt, but like of course they like pushed that. Like the room where we shot didn't burn, like it's protected by the devil. I don't know. So then there were 2 on-set injuries in the scene with the bed itself. So Ellen Burstyn, when she gets thrown, sorry, spoiler alert, when she gets thrown to the ground.
It's been 40 years, it's okay.
Oh, no, you never know. She like screams out, and it's a genuine scream because like you had mentioned when we were taking our break, he had just told the rigging crew just rip her off the bed because he wanted it to look so realistic. So it was like more aggressive than they had practiced. And she fractured her, like, either her tailbone or like her lower like spine. I think she like ruptured some discs.
She ruptured a couple of discs and had a spinal fracture.
And it like still affects her. Still affects her. A lifelong injury.
And there's like a close up of her face, like
he knew it was going to happen essentially because that's the take they used.
That was the money shot.
And so it's just like, okay, well, you're abusing your actors. And then also, in that same scene, the rigging on the bed really hurt her back as well because like she's like thrashing on the bed and she's like rigged. Yeah, Linda Blair. She's like rigged on the bed as well. Right. So they're both getting injured in this like scene because he wants it to quote look real. Whatever. He also like told Linda Blair like what masturbation was for like that scene with the cross. Like,
that's who you want explaining it to your child.
Yeah, like really stop traumatizing like Linda Blair. It's really not okay.
It's right here. Have it. After auditioning 1,000 girls for The Exorcist, Friedkin frickin' picked normal, happy Linda Blair because she understood the concept of masturbating. Have you ever done it? Friedkin asked the 12-year-old sitting with her mom. No. Sure, she shot back. Haven't you? Oh, she's sassy. Okay.
I like it. Okay.
Sure. So
she's supposed to be an absolutely lovely woman, by the way. Yeah. Just lovely, lovely woman.
How about asking appropriately, do you understand what this is? Or having the mom ask her, have you done it?
Yeah.
What does that have to do with understanding?
Well, look, I mean, this
I know.
This was also a time when there was, like you were saying, the push in movies in the 70s was gritty realism. Yeah. So, I mean, for better or worse, he created a masterpiece. It still holds up today.
It really does.
He's a horrible person, I mean, because he's done this, not a nice guy. But he also did something that nobody had done before, made a horror movie that was atmospheric without using music or melodrama.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was what was shaking people up. People were running out of the theater.
So that's the thing is that like all of the before release is like alleged basically because like it's there were crews are so big, like people die, but you can kind of spin anything. I think my opinion is that a little bit of studio magic was happening, being like, ooh, this cursed movie that like you can see like it like kill people to get it out.
Yeah.
I think it's a good marketing strategy. And then 2 of the actors actually died as well the first week of post-production. So it's just like all of this chaos before it's even released, which like is probably a little bit of movie magic. But once it's released, people in the theaters are completely unprepared for like what they're seeing, and they're passing out and they're injuring themselves and they're throwing up. And so it sort of creates this fear and this panic that people are getting possessed in the theaters just by seeing it. And countries start banning the film.
Yeah.
And like small towns won't show it. People are then getting bused to other towns where they can see it. It becomes like this, like we've been talking about, this cultural juggernaut where it's now taken on a life of its own, and people are like sneaking out to see it. They're wanting to get affected in this way. And for anyone who hasn't seen the film, what are you doing? But there's all these like cut scenes that are intended to be like incredibly jarring. And like to disorient the audience as they're moving through the narrative. And that is like causing people to, you know, whether it's epilepsy or blacking out or whatever it was triggering in these audiences, now you're in a closed space. And there's like very visceral reactions. And again, it goes back to like now we're all experiencing this together, and like they're throwing up, they're passing out. I now am also like engaging in this way.
I remember, I can't remember how old I was when the movie came out. I did not see it in the theaters because I shouldn't have. I was too young. But I do remember because I would go to sleep every night with a transistor radio, and I remember the radio ad for it was Mercedes McCambridge voice going, "Are you there?" Ding, 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 ding. And then Tubular Bells would start playing, and I was like, this is scaring the shit out of me.
My mom saw it in the theater, and she said that, I forget what theater it was, you know, maybe Pasadena-ish or LA, but that they had like a window at some point, like on the theater somewhere with the blowing curtain. So it was like super, so you walk up and you see this and you're like, just at the theater, how cool is that? They went so far as to have that sort of marketing going on, like you're the exorcist walking up to the front of the house.
Well, and it's so crazy because I think if you look historically, this is sort of the kickoff of the like satanic panic of the like late 70s, 80s, 90s. Billy Graham came out and he was very strongly against this movie, saying that like the film itself, like the film that it was shot on was cursed, and that any like film house that like let the film into the theater would be like possessed by the devil. And
my goodness,
you know, obviously the demon's name is never said in the film, but like
that's another thing too.
And they're like it's the devil, like, and you know, in the script it's a different name.
Pazuzu.
They like latched on to that, like they're trying to get the devil into, and it like really is the start of like that sort of crusade by like evangelical Christians, no judgment, of just like getting the devil out of your home. Because like you said, you could see it on TV, you can see it, it's like literally in your living room, and it sort of creates this cultural fear. And
now it's like so, but it was also the zeitgeist. It was such a cultural landmark. And now on demand, you can watch. You could watch a possession movie every day of the week. You know,
there's so many that came out right after this one. Not to mention the increase of exorcisms, like skyrocketed after this movie. I know there was just like a ton of exorcisms being performed.
Well, which is really sad because does that indicate then? Oh, now we found another way to judge different people who are eccentric or odd, you know, or mentally ill. You know, that like now we can use this stigma against them, or you know, use someone's sexuality and demonize that. That's sad.
Wow, it's such a good film, though.
It's so good. It really does hold up. That's the perfect phrase.
Now, with all the things that occurred on set, there was even things like there were reports too of crew what they were calling objects move around on their own. Most notably, a telephone used to communicate on set that rose from the receiver and fell multiple times. I think they even tried to get like a reverend to come in and do a real life exorcism on set.
I read that as well.
And he like the director was like, kind of don't do a full exorcism because it's like,
so he did like a little bit.
He did like a pep talk basically because like I think even the director knew like maybe this is too much. Like maybe an exorcism on The Exorcist is like too much. Kind of like trying to reel it in. It's like we just called him, like right.
Well, do you think, I guess from everyone's opinion, like, do you think that the set was haunted or cursed?
No.
No.
I mean, I've worked in the industry. I've worked in the industry. My husband, worked on The Grinch That Stole Christmas. People got injured on that movie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that one's definitely haunted. I think we can all agree.
Well, even on the Harry Potter movies, there was a stunt double or an actor that died during a stunt. Yeah.
Sure. And weren't there, like, family members of crew that were passed away? But, I mean, give any given population. That's going to happen over months.
Statistically, people are going to die on the set. I don't think the set itself was cursed by anything other than, like, the director's ego. I think he created such negative, toxic energy that it just kind of leaked throughout the set, and that can be overpowering. Like,
yeah.
But no, do I think there was something, like, possessing the set? I doubt it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like it to me.
I don't know.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, I worked in the industry too. It's like
stuff happens.
Stuff does happen.
Now, that being said, I've been on sound stages before that I know are haunted. Like, you walk in and you're like, oh, there's something going on here.
Yeah. But I think because of, like, the stunts, the accidents, it was developing a lot of anxiety and tension. The director was not doing anything to ease, anyone's mind, or he wasn't even positive. I mean, it was just like, I think it was just a bad atmosphere, and it just, like, kind of all went downhill to make this amazing movie. But no, I don't think it was haunted.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that a lot of people were hellishly unlucky on the set.
Yeah. That's a good consensus.
Yes.
Okay, so to bring in the true crime aspect, I'm going to talk about someone affiliated with the film and then his connection to a series of killings in New York around the time of The Exorcist. So I'm going to kind of go on a timeline here. So The Exorcist was released December of 73. So let's go back to January 73. So January 4th, 1973, a man named Ronald Cabo, he's 29 years old, and he was murdered in his West Village apartment. He was a known leather enthusiast in the gay community at the time. Oh wait, there's a lot of it. And he had been stabbed to death on his sofa, and then his apartment was set on fire.
Oh my God.
Probably to destroy the evidence, right? Which, as we've talked about, arsonists.
Was any of his leather?
Damn it.
Yes. But we will learn leather holds up. So 4 days later, friends Ronald McNiven, he was 40, and John Beardsley, age 53, they were found stabbed to death in their apartments. So they were also well known to the S&M scene around town. They lived in separate units in the building, but they were found together in McNiven's living room. And again, a fire had been set. So we're seeing, like, a very obvious pattern, I think, here. Then a few days later, so we're just at January 17th, Robert Barrero, he's a 23-year-old gay libertarian front member. He was found floating in the Hudson River, still wearing his black leather jacket. And he had been missing for 5 weeks, so he was actually pretty decomposed when they found him, but still leather jacket on. 9 days after that, 2 other gay men and their pet poodle.
When dogs get involved.
Dead.
Dogs get involved.
I know. They also had connections to
What's
the
his
leather
last name
community.
again? I'm sorry. What was it? Balta? What was his?
Who?
The killer.
Oh, I haven't talked about it
Oh,
yet.
okay.
Hang on.
Sorry.
Spoiler.
Well, I love that it's something I didn't know about. I'm so excited.
Hilarious.
I gotta look it up.
Just sit back and listen while I tell you a story. So these 2 men and their pet poodle were found all killed in their apartment. And then January 28th. So this is all literally within the same month.
Yeah.
Oh my
all of these
God.
things I'm telling you.
Was the poodle in leather?
I was going to ask.
Sorry, keep going.
I don't know, but I can find out.
I'm going to say yes. I think we can all agree on that.
I agree.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Let's picture that for a moment.
with the little hat and
I thought harness.
Yeah.
Yes. Right?
Yes.
Leather harness.
Yeah.
Okay.
chaps, everything.
Okay, so January 28th, Brooklyn Heights building superintendent checks on his tenant whose radio has been blasting for hours. When he enters his apartment, he finds Nelson Robert had been stabbed to death. His corpse was sprawled on the floor beneath a gray blanket.
Oh my God.
He was a 32-year-old school teacher, leather bar regular. and his roommate was found in another room with his neck broken.
Oh.
And their black toy poodle had been drowned in the bathroom sink.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, my God.
I really hate this guy.
I know.
So much.
So obviously at this point, the S&M community and leather community in that area of New York were very frightened, very worried. So we're going to kind of fast forward. So there's that grouping of murders in January. Then The Exorcist is released in December of that year. And then about 4 years or so after the release of... I can hear that feedback.
Oh, sorry.
The release of the film between 1977 and 1978, again, the New York LGBT community was being targeted and terrorized as the dismembered bodies of gay men started floating up in the Hudson River.
Oh my God.
So the killings became known as the trash bag murders. There's also a terribly homophobic name for the murders also that I'm not going to mention. But there were 6 victims. All had been mutilated, chopped up, and put into trash bags and then thrown into the Hudson River.
Oh, my God.
The conditions of the bodies made identification virtually impossible just because of decomposition. They were able to identify possibly some tattoos, and then some of the clothing they were able to trace back to some Greenwich Village shops that catered specifically to the gay community.
Oh, wow.
So they assumed that, again, this was sort of kind of the same thing going on a few years later. So around this time, 1977, of course, the community was further panic-stricken due to the brutal death of drag queen Toni Lee. So she had been strangled in her apartment. And it's at this point that a columnist for the Village Voice, Arthur Bell, not to be confused with Art Bell, that we talked about earlier, full circle, he starts writing extensively on the subject and these murders that are going on, kind of bringing it to light because, you know, the community was feeling very marginalized and that the law enforcement wasn't necessarily giving it a whole lot of attention and effort. So he starts writing. And then on September 14th, a few months after his initial articles come out, Addison Verrill, he's a 36-year-old, he's a well-known film critic for Variety magazine. He's found murdered in his apartment.
Oh, man.
So he was bludgeoned to death with a skillet and then stabbed as well. So again, Arthur Bell is covering these murders in the Village Voice. And then in October, he gets a phone call from someone claiming to be the killer. They call him up, and in a 20-minute conversation, basically the caller says he met and partied with Addison at several leather bars over the course of an evening. Then they go back to Addison's West Village studio at about 5 a.m. The caller claims that over the course of the evening, they had consumed cocaine, poppers, marijuana, scotch, and then after consensual sex...
And a sensible dinner.
Yeah. Or breakfast, because it's like 6 o'clock. The killer says, quote, "Something hit me. Addison hadn't been reciprocal. It wasn't the sex act itself that wasn't reciprocal. It was the soul act, too. I wanted a lasting thing, something that would go beyond sex, into a friendship, a lover, marriage," end quote.
Ugh.
So,
these needy boys.
Right? I mean, come on.
Jeffrey Dahmer.
Right.
There you go.
He did not want them to leave, right? He was trying to create a sex zombie.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, literally. Pouring acid in them.
Hashtag sex zombie.
Yeah,
Ooh.
There you go.
Okay. So when Bell gives this info to police, he had details from the caller that hadn't been released to the public, like some specific items that were taken from the home. So they felt that it was pretty legit. And then Bell, he's like the conduit to all this. He gets contacted by a man named Richard Ryan who said he knew who Addison's killer was. And he said that he had been in rehab with a guy named Paul Bateson, and that Paul was a 33-year-old alcoholic who had once worked as an x-ray technician at various New York hospitals. Ryan called that Bateson had basically called him and confessed to Addison's murder like the day after the slaying. And that he had stated to Ryan that I like to kill, and that he also started claiming responsibility for the trash bag murders.
Wow.
So this info was quickly given to police. they go scoop up Paul Bateson, and Bateson totally cops to the Addison murder. He even leads them to, here's his passport, here's his credit card, here's the stuff I took. So it was solid. So who's Paul Bateson, do you ask, Scott? Let me tell you.
Oh, I want to know.
Funny you should mention.
I know. So Paul Bateson was working as an X-ray technician at NYU Medical Center, where director William Friedkin happened to shoot the famous scene of Reagan undergoing her cardioid angiography procedure. And so he actually used a neuropsych surgeon and his team for the scenes. So he has lines and everything in the movie, right? He's the one that's telling her scoot down.
This.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I have to go watch it again tonight.
He has a legit IMDb page, you guys.
Damn.
Oh my God.
Why has he got to be more famous than us?
Right?
No, seriously.
So he has several lines in that scene, and working with Linda Blair. So, like I said, he's eventually arrested for Verrill's murder, and he gets convicted in March of 1979. According to his own testimony, sure enough, he had picked up Verrill at a gay bar in Greenwich Village, and they went back to his apartment where the two had sex, and then he crushed his skull with the skillet and proceeded to stab him numerous times. So while he was awaiting trial, though, at Rikers Island, he began to brag to other people in the jail about the other murders, saying that he picked up gay men and murdered them, quote, just for fun, and that he had chopped up their bodies and put the pieces in plastic trash bags. Now, this was in the news, so who knows? I mean, he could be kind of wanting to glorify and get attention and just is regurgitating what he heard. So the fact that those bodies were so decomposed, they were actually never identified, which is sad because you don't even have the 2 and 2 of like missing persons being put together with these people. You
think about it though, that time too, that we take for granted that gays and lesbians were incredibly marginalized communities, and if you lived, if you lived in what we term gay ghettos, it's like, and a lot of those people probably didn't have contact with their family members, so nobody is there actually to report that they went missing. That's really sad.
It is. It's very, very sad.
Yeah.
So this is the strange part in which I was doing my research and kind of following up a couple loose ends last night. So in 1970, so we're talking 3 years before The Exorcist and before that first batch of murders, there's a book published called Cruising by Gerald Walker, who was a New York Times reporter, right? So we know this gets made into a movie, and I'll touch on that in a second. But the novel is about an undercover cop looking for a homosexual serial killer in the world of sadomasochism, also leather and gay bars in Greenwich Village. So 3 years before this happened, this book gets published, which I thought it was inspired by these.
Oh, I did too. Oh, wow. I thought that's where you were going.
And I was like, checking the dates and making sure.
What?
So, yes. So then several years later, Exorcist director William Friedkin is directing the film version of Cruising.
With Al Pacino.
Yeah. With Al Pacino. It came out in 1980. So he then hears that Bateson, who was in his film, possibly did some of these murders. So he goes and visits him in prison.
What?
Yeah.
The method is the dumbest thing.
So he goes and visits him in prison, interviews him about it, and he is an uncredited consultant on the film. That's on his IMDb page. Also,
making criminals famous.
Right.
He's already famous.
Already.
I know.
Already.
But you're absolutely right. Like the way you fan a toxic ego, evil ego like that. That's just. But that says a lot about Friedkin too. Like that guy. That's narcissism. This is all narcissism on his part.
Oh, the serial killer was in my movie?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to make another movie, and I'm going to. Yeah.
How can I use that?
So, I mean, though the police took Bates' confession about the trash bag murders at face value, there wasn't enough physical evidence to link him to those. So he was only eventually charged with the murder of Addison Verrill. He was sentenced to 20 years to life in jail. He was released in 2004 and now said to live somewhere in upstate New York.
Great.
And it's confirmed that he'll be one of the serial killers featured in season 2 of Mindhunter.
Oh, cool.
So,
oh my God, I'm so excited for season 2. When does that come out?
Not fast enough.
Literally not.
Rack. Okay.
So they're going to, from what I hear, what they're going to focus on is that there were 2 active serial killers at the same time in New York, and the other one, of course, is Son of Sam.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
I'm so excited for that. I'm happy for this tie-in. But yes,
what a weird connection. I mean, talk about it, just a very odd set of coinkydinks there.
Completely. I mean, just, yeah.
That is insane.
Very insane. But I need to know, like, was this someone who read this book and then I'm going to go copycat?
That's first thing, because I also thought it was based on that, but as soon as he says the opposite must be true, he must have taken the...
Mm-hmm. And how twisted, that's awful. And so I don't even know if Bateson is responsible for all of these.
Right.
But clearly someone was. And that month of just all of those men and their poodles being killed.
Not the poodles.
Not the dogs, man. The dogs are not about this life.
I know.
Maybe the dogs were in love with leather. Like, they probably
with their own little community.
I
get the dog part.
So sad.
The dog just wanted to live his life.
Yeah, so there's your true crime.
Love it.
Wow.
Piece to that.
I did not realize, because I've heard of that story, obviously, but I had forgotten that it was connected to
I didn't know that it was
Exorcist.
connected to the exorcism either.
Oh,
I remember I had forgotten. I remember hearing about it, but even then, I thought he was like an extra. I didn't realize he...
When I went back and watched it, I was like, wow, he has lines.
He's in it.
He's in it.
Because if you're thinking about when they're filming, if he was responsible for that first batch, he's killing while this movie is being filmed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still getting his
So
residual
there you go.
checks.
Oh my God.
I mean,
now that he lives in upstate New York.
Oh my gosh.
Yikes.
Yeah.
What was in your opinion, like why was he committing these crimes, especially with a specific community? Why leather? Why?
I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because I'm on the fence of whether or not he's responsible for all those. So, if it's not him, so whoever we're sort of speculating about, is it something that they are viscerally against? And so they're luring these people or going back home with them or, there wasn't any information that I found about breaking into any apartments. So, but you would think like, okay, who's the guy that went home with all these people? Like, it's a pretty tight community, So, so-and-so left with this guy, and then so-and-so left with this guy.
I mean, that's one of the things that they set up in the movie Cruising, which I hated that movie. I mean, it's very homophobic. It's a terrible, terrible film. Al Pacino, chews a lot of scenery, but he does a good job. But one of the things that they do is they just promote it as if like, it was sort of the swinging, the free sex, free love, and people were really kind of, experimenting in a lot of different ways. But they just portray the gay community as not taking any precautions at all. But the other side of it that they do, interesting as the cop is doing his investigation, is that the bartenders were like, oh yeah, there's some guy that's picking up somebody every night. Now there are a lot of pickups, but they'll remember certain characteristics.
Yeah, so that's what kind of brings me back to sort of the Jeffrey Dahmer, kind of shy guy sitting in the corner, but then takes someone home or goes home with them and then is doing these awful things for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh my
somber.
goodness.
Leave poodles out of it.
Yes.
I know.
Protect the poodles.
Protect the poodles.
I know.
Aww.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
This has been really great.
Yes. Yeah, this has been a very awesome episode and recording.
And today is International Podcast Day, the day that we're recording, which is awesome timing on our part that we didn't even realize until later.
When are we releasing this?
Probably end of October-ish.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure yet.
Okay.
But yeah, so we'll do it at the end of October.
We're doing a follow-up episode also. We have a special guest that if you guys want to hang out with us for another one, we'd love to have you. A very good friend of mine, Al Hobbs, who is a set designer and has worked in the industry for many, many years, is obsessed with the Exorcist movie.
Wow.
Like he's a super fan. He is a super fan. that, in fact, he was going to be here today to take notes so he could comment on it.
Yeah, I saw that.
But he ended up having a conflict. But his take on it is takes certain specific things that we've touched the top of and goes really deep.
Wow.
That you're going to love. I'm very excited.
So we're just going to do like a little mini episode.
That's awesome.
That is like super fan.
We call it a mini episode. It'll be 90 minutes.
hours
Sure. We're at 2 hours right now.
Every mini episode is always so long.
I know. Ours is like, it goes over an hour, sorry.
Yeah. You guys want to talk about Pasadena Playhouse just another time?
Oh, yeah, sure. So Pasadena Playhouse reached out to us not too long ago. They wanted us to do a collaboration. So it turns out that your girls from Hollyweird Paranormal will be doing a live show October 30th and 31st following the famous London West End's performance of The Woman in Black.
Yay!
Yeah, so we go up and do our first live show on the Pasadena Playhouse stage from 10:30 till 11:30. We will be discussing the history and the haunted history of the Pasadena Playhouse.
I love that. I loved your episode on haunted theaters. And
there are a lot of famous ghosts.
The Reeves case is just
and there's a lot of famous people that acted on the stage and still continue to act on the stage. Yeah, you have
so cool.
Everyone from Gene Hackman, Angela Bassett, and then we even had Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield, and who's the OG Superman? Reeves. Yeah, George Reeves. He acted on that stage. And there's a rumor that he may be the precocious ghost that plays tricks on the actors in the dressing room. So we will definitely be covering all that on stage live.
Oh, how cool.
That's so exciting. We're so happy for you.
So we'll be doing drawings in the month of October. So we'll definitely be doing drawings for tickets, for a pair of tickets to go see us at the Playhouse.
I will be there.
And if you haven't seen the show, it's so creepy.
It is very scary.
By far the most scared I've ever been. Because there's something about seeing live, like, I can disassociate because I remind myself, like, it's on screen, you're in a movie theater, you're at home. I'm still pretty scared. And I, like, cross my eyes so I don't have to watch. But there's something about it happening and it's a real person in front of you on stage that I find so...
I don't think I've seen any.
The story itself is also incredible.
You know what is actually, don't laugh, but it's actually, when it's done right, is a terrifying play, is Sweeney Todd.
Yes.
Sweeney Todd is like, you'll laugh, but it's horrifying and scary.
Really
and there's
scary.
also what was another one? There was a stage version of Dracula that people said it was like, and
wow.
I think it's also that live theater experience. Like you said, you are so brought into that live performance.
Well, and horror theater, I think, is like kind of an untapped market.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a good medium for it because you can't get away from a person in front of you experiencing it. The magic of theater is that it's the audience and the director and the actor creating something together.
Yes.
And that fear permeates you. Whereas, like, with a screen, I definitely am still scared. So I'm not going to say, like, I'm so brave. But there is something a little different about, like, watching it happen live.
So very exciting. We'll get this up. Hopefully I think our live stream I think it cuts us off at an hour.
I think so too.
It's punishing us.
Anyway, you guys, thanks so much for listening in. We're very excited to do our first collaboration with Hollyweird Paranormal.
This was awesome.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Of course. We knew it was magic.
Fun.
First connected.
So we're going to sign off. Guys, what's your sign off?
We just say bye as long as we can.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, it's really original.
Well, and for everyone listening on our podcast, thank you from Dr. Shiloh and Dr. Scott on LA
Not so.
Confidential.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.